Destiny has been getting absolutely destroyed recently. I thought that these clips would end, but they just keep on coming. People are waking up to the fact that the pinnacle of left-wing ideological possession is so inadequate compared to mental scrutiny, coherence, logic, especially when that person is Jordan Peterson. It's getting brutal, is what I'm saying. Check this out.
Obviously, glaring possibility is that injecting billions of people with a vaccine that was not tested by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, tested to the standards of all other vaccines.
With the thoroughness that it should have before it was forced upon people also might be a contributing factor.
Also, the fact that people attempted to force it on others by saying we should have vaccine passports, you shouldn't be able to enter movie theaters. That was a dialogue that was going on in California. It was being pushed. It almost happened where I live. People were not going to be allowed to use movie theaters and public buildings, libraries, even if they could not produce a vaccine card, airlines as well. And this again just shows the tyrannical nature of the radical left.
Partly because we know that it led to
the squirming ideologue is getting very uncomfortable, although he has been fidgeting the entire interview. So
a rise in myocarditis among young men. And we also know that there was
I'm obviously unvaccinated.
Absolutely no reason whatsoever to ever recommend that that vaccine was delivered to young children. So whose risk of death at COVID was so close to zero that it might as well have been zero.
When you're talking about a disease,
the fact that the COVID death chances for young people was near zero is nothing more than an inconvenience to leftists. They actually were not interested in the percentages. I think that the percentages could be 5 times higher than they actually were, meaning, let's say, 0.5%, and they still would have the exact same amount of worry. What they were after is tyrannical control over your life by wielding the facade of science as you either agree with us, and it is perverted science, so it isn't actually objective truth, but they're just saying they're substituting in their ideology for the facade of science. In the exact same way they pick and choose what objective pieces of evidence that they should pay attention to because they completely ignore biology when it's time to say men and women are physically and psychologically different.
Disease, the risk of death isn't the only thing that you worry about for the disease. There's also
so you're going to talk about transmission? Because that was another thing that the COVID vaccine pushed.
It's so brutal.
Yeah, but it didn't do anything to transmission.
It absolutely did because it decreased your chance of getting affected. It didn't.
Why is this a political issue? The left wants control over your life. It's so transparent.
Sure, it didn't get rid of transmission, but it reduced transmission.
Yeah, but it was claimed that it would get rid of
only
transmission.
Only if you take one reading of...
No, it was claimed by tons of people.
One single quote, I think that Biden said one time where he said, no, come on. Biden one time on the news says, if you get the vaccine...
Everyone was saying that it reduces transmission before anyone knew anything about it. And I'm talking about your average person who knew nothing about virology or science or medicine.
It won't
transmit the disease. That is so silly.
Which was it? No.
Do you know that our Prime Minister in Canada deprived Canadians of the right to travel for 6 months because the unvaccinated were going to transmit COVID?
Right, obviously tyrannical.
With more likelihood than the vaccinated.
There it is.
So this wasn't one bloody statement. This was
hold on.
thorough government.
The leftist brand is so tarnished and damaged. It's like, how do you even debate away something like that when you're preventing people from using banks? You're arguing that people should not be able to use public buildings because they disagree with your politics. There's no real way to come back from that. The only thing you can do is double down on the demonization mechanisms of Marxism to say the person that we're disagreeing with, they are not worthy of being regarded as a person, and we therefore don't have to contend with their ideas. This is the reason why they can't debate, and they just get owned by Jordan Peterson.
What I'm saying is there wasn't a statement given that if you get vaccinated, there is a 0% chance of transmitting the disease.
What is he talking about? There were literally millions of statements given by millions of people that it would stop transmission.
The idea is that
it's one of the dozens of lies that was purported.
Which will lead you also to having
much worse side effect than side effects that have caused other vaccines to be taken off the market before.
A 7 out of 100,000 rate of acute myocarditis or pericarditis is not a worse, is more likely to cause myocarditis.
Look how desperate the left is to control what you put in your body. Isn't that insane? It's actually crazy. They get feverishly impassioned when you start to say, no, actually, you can't control what I put in my body, and you can't say that I can't use libraries or movie theaters if I disagree with you.
Or pericarditis?
Yes, I don't think the data suggests support that presupposition anymore. The latest peer-reviewed studies show that that's simply not true, especially among young men. I told you at the beginning of this conversation that the progressive leftists were on the side of the pharmaceutical companies.
It's not about being on the side of the pharmaceutical companies. It's about really, yeah.
The reason why it looks absurd is because Marxism only believes in power as the dichotomy between people. There's no such thing as logic or reason or reciprocity or merit. There's only power. This is the reason why they look at the mega pharmaceutical companies just happen to align with their ideology that says this is the right opinion to have in order to have virtue, and so they say that they are completely not corrupt. Wait, in a minute I bet he's going to say that there's nothing you can possibly scrutinize the pharmaceutical companies for. They've been perfectly fine. The leftist position is not actually interested in coherence or philosophical consistency. The question is only one of what position grants you good person status.
Yeah, well, what I see as the unholy part of that alliance with the pharmaceutical companies is that it dovetails with the radical utopians' willingness to use power to impose their utopian vision.
Well, then what do you make of the
otherwise,
fact
how
that...
would you explain it? Because the leftists should have been the ones that were most skeptical about the bloody pharmaceutical.
If they were ideologically consistent or philosophically consistent, they obviously operate purely within ideology.
Companies. And they jumped on the vaccine bandwagon in exactly the same way that you're doing right now.
Faster than people jumped on the Lakers bandwagon when LeBron James moved to the Lakers.
Well, companies have helped us tremendously.
Yeah, right. There we go. Fine. No,
I don't think
so. No.
Oh, it's brutal. Yeah, it's so brutal. Jordan Peterson, with an intellect orders of magnitude more powerful than whatever this guy is, just forced destiny into defending pharmaceutical companies. Think about that. This is the reason why no one takes the left seriously. As soon as you analyze with a prism for coherence using logic, reason, rationality, you understand that they are interested in reality. They're interested in fraudulence and resentment.
No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think they're utterly wrong. I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies...
Right. Jordan Peterson's wrong for saying pharmaceutical companies are corrupt.
...who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt.
Corrupt is a very broad...
No.
Wow. Dude, the evidence that even before 2019, the evidence that pharmaceutical companies were corrupt, I mean, that was basically the battle cry of any leftist whenever you talked about medicine or healthcare. They're like, pharmaceutical companies are corrupt. That's all they said. But as soon as the position changes, oh my gosh, am I going to be a good person anymore? Oh, I better quickly adhere to the ideology. Men can get pregnant.
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence, willing to extract money out of people by putting their health?
This was literally the battle cry of the left for years as they were talking about insulin. Like, what do they even... It's as if they're expecting you to have no memory. Well, of course, we know they don't want you to have a memory because they want to erode history and rewrite it.
Off on the line. You don't believe that?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Yeah, obviously. Wow, that was brutal. I see why people are still posting these videos, dude. It's absolutely insane. This was a shorter video. Be sure to like and subscribe. The left is completely ravaged and destroyed.